hello. Question mark.
We are flying without a net today.
Yes, we are sans Pelham again. I think San Diego Comic-Con / bait might have crumbled him, so he is recuperating at home.
Yeah, the Lord of Disease, aka Con Crud, attacked him.
Yes.
So yeah, he is home getting better.
So we're piloting the production here from the back seat of the car.
My arms aren't that long,
No,
Bart.
no.
I can't reach the steering wheel,
It's
especially way over there.
It's all the way over there. Audio is a bit low. All right, I was afraid of that. That was my greatest nightmare, is that the audio would be a bit low. So,
come on, this is a chance for everyone to read lips for the next hour.
Yes, I sound very quiet. Okay, I'm going to, if you wouldn't mind doing the intros, I'm going to try and adjust the audio on the fly here.
Well, hello everyone. This is Dragon Plus. That empty spot is usually occupied by Bart Carroll, our brave host, and I am his sometime co-host, Jeremy Crawford, lead rules designer of Dungeons & Dragons, and we are here today to answer your questions about D&D rules and really D&D anything. The last few episodes, we talked quite a bit about the Artificer, which we've been exploring in Unearthed Arcana. And today we're going to shift to answering as many of your general questions as we can get to between now and 2 p.m. And Bart is
checking the audio requests.
I'm going to scooch over to look at the chat.
If this is sounding louder and better for folks.
How does he sound?
Is my audio levels a little higher now?
Does Bart sound all right, everyone?
Aside from the nasally drone, just the volume levels.
Someone says better, and
okay.
someone else says same. Oh, no, they say Bart's good now.
Okay, all right.
All right. Then away we go. Bart returned.
Yes, all right.
You climbed back into the back seat, and the car still hasn't crashed.
Yet, but the overhead lights will go off in 20 minutes, so that's...
Because the lights in this room depend on motion, and the detector is over in Pelham's area. I feel like we're in the Starship Enterprise and no one is at the helm.
Yes, no, it's very autopilot.
We're sitting here going, engage, and there's no one there to hit the button.
That would be kind of a sad James T. Kirk, like he's retired. He's just still calling out commands from the retirement home. Nobody is paying attention to him.
Well, I think that would be Captain Picard. I think Captain Kirk in the retirement home would be doing his double-fisted hit on the back. There'd be a note in his chart so all the nurses know, watch out.
Right.
Don't turn your back to him because he's going to put his fist together and kapowie.
When he wants an extra Jell-O, he will attack. So yes, we've got some questions that we're going to be answering today. We've moved on from the Artificer the last couple of episodes. Jeremy has returned from his own convention travels and your own convention crud. You were out for a couple of days as
I
well.
was, yep.
Not a fun
I wore myself out because I came back from the UK and then was working 2 long days to try to catch up. I'm sure many of you have had that before. It's like, yay, time away, and then you get back and everything is piled up.
There is a head cold going around in the Carroll household, which has affected Quinn. So the question for you, how old were you when you learned to blow your nose?
Oh, wow. I don't know.
Because at 6, not a skill that
he
proficient
hasn't
in.
figured it out yet.
No, he's terrible at it. He can do many a thing, but blowing his nose is not one of them.
Well, there's still a long road ahead of him then.
So we do have some news and announcements along the way. I'll save some of it for the end here so we can get to your questions as we go. We also have some off-the-topic questions that I wanted to ask just because I do like to ask them. I'll start with one now. Have you completed Stranger Things 3? And we will not give out spoilers.
So I've watched only the first episode.
Ooh, okay.
So because I was out of the country for a couple of weeks, I have a backlog of things to watch, and got distracted. Actually, I had all these things I was expecting to watch, but then sort of there was a door next to me and I wandered into it instead. It's like a dungeon adventure. It's like, all right, we're headed straight for the dragon's lair. I somehow ended up in the Flumph lair, and I've been watching the Saint Seiya reboot instead.
What is this now?
So there was this cartoon back in the 80s called Saint Seiya. It was based on a manga.
Okay.
And Netflix has this co-production with Japan that is a remake.
Yeah.
And it's fun, it's retro, with nice CG. I've been enjoying it. But part of it is because it is pushing my nostalgia buttons.
Which Stranger Things also does very well. I won't spoil it because I made the mistake of going online mid-watching of the season and had things spoiled. Ooh, that was a painful lesson.
So I was enjoying the first episode. It was also a little tough to watch because I so like those friends being tight-knit, and this is not a spoiler because it's in the first episode. They're going through, teenage growing pains as their interests evolve, and that was sort of like a splash of cold water on my excitement of watching. It's like, I want them to be good friends and support each other.
They will definitely get back. I don't think that's a spoiler either to say they definitely come together as friends.
We'll see. I'm glad, even if that is a spoiler, I'm glad you're telling me because that will help motivate me to keep watching.
The first 2 episodes, they are a bit of a slow burn. Of Stranger Things, I think, has always relished its 80s nostalgia. They really go all in season 3 with the look and the feel and the music, and then the 80s action references as well. But I think people know much of it's set in and around Starcourt Mall. So they do spend some good teenage time there for a while, but it will pick up as well.
Great.
Do you remember? I had it here. Do you remember much about 1985?
Let's see. I'm trying.
Where was a 1985 Jeremy Hopford? Because it was brought up in the chat again.
Oh, Jeremy Hopford.
Yes.
That is the bunny version of me. Let's see. I think I was in high school in '85.
I was 85 was a very impressionable year for a young Bart Carroll. I was just graduated from 5th grade.
No, I was in junior high. I was not in high school.
I was just about to start junior high.
Okay.
Which is, it's a very transitional time to go from the safety of, in grammar school, you've got one teacher, they know their class, they know who has a good day, bad day, issues, good day, things to. You go to junior high, and all of a sudden you're going class by class by class. Your teacher only has you for an hour at a time. You're in the wild for a lot of ways. That's tough.
Junior high was tough.
Junior high sucks.
Yes. Yeah, I have a lot of good elementary school memories and good high school memories and good college memories, but dear God, do I have to stretch to think of good junior high memories. About most of the ones I can think of have to do with my friends I played D&D with, or also it was in junior high that we played a lot of TSR's Marvel Superheroes.
Oh yeah.
And so we'd have very important lunchtime conversations like who would win in a fight, Thor, Spider-Man, the Hulk, or Doctor Strange. I always was arguing Doctor Strange would win every matchup because I was a big Doctor Strange fan.
Yes. Did that ever win the argument? Or was it always Thor versus Hulk?
Someone would always say some super strong person could punch Doctor Strange out, and then I would always counter, yes, but he can go astral, and so even if his body is knocked out, he's still casting spells on you in his astral form.
Yeah, didn't we saw that with Bruce Banner went back in Avengers Endgame, right? And he got punched right out of his body.
That's right.
Astral punch.
By the Ancient One.
Yes.
So actually, in the movies at least, they showed that one of the wizards could beat the Hulk.
Sure, yeah, I don't doubt that. Yeah. Magic is a powerful thing. That was always, I think that was always Superman's Achilles as well.
Yes.
Physical, he could obviously beat anyone in anything, but if it were magic, the rules are changed.
Which many people don't know because TV and films that focus on Superman always go back to kryptonite. But yeah, for those of you who haven't read the comic books, Superman does have 2 weaknesses, and the other is magic.
Yeah. which makes sense.
Yeah. And which is one of the reasons why any time they would need somebody to maybe rein him in, Wonder Woman could always take him on because she would sometimes wield a sword blessed by Hephaestus. And she also has her magic lasso.
I was going to say, does the lasso count as magic? Can
Yes.
Can Superman not break out of the magic lasso?
I don't think he can. Yeah.
Interesting.
Don't quote me on that, but because I know her sword actually could cut him.
Okay.
And she is only one of the only superheroes who just raw strength-wise, and then because of her association with magic, can take on Superman.
It's my first crush, Wonder Woman.
Oh, I loved Wonder Woman. Yeah, of the original, of the sort of the big three in the DC universe, when I was a kid, Wonder Woman was my favorite. Partly because of the Linda Carter TV show.
Yes, yeah, that was also, I've certainly fed into it.
Yeah.
So we are going to be doing 2 raffles, as we are often apt to do. I think the first one, if it is not up and running now, it will be shortly. We've got a few things to give away. We've got a D&D calendar. I believe will be going up in the first raffle. We'll add in a few items as swag as well to pad it out a little bit just for fun.
When you were away, by the way, trying to get to the steering wheel,
yes,
people were wondering if this was actually a vinyl. So, yeah. It's a calendar.
It is a calendar. That would be a good album, though. The music of.
Can I flip it around?
Absolutely.
So people can see. If they zoom in.
Yeah, and again, if we had Pelham, he could zoom in, but
and show the beautiful paintings that appear in this calendar.
So what else do we want to talk about? I mentioned Pelham was at San Diego Comic-Con over the weekend. The latest product, Tyranny of Dragons, was announced there. It is a combination of 2 other books that I have right here on the table as well. 2 of the earliest books.
Those were the first 2 adventures published for 5th edition outside of the starter set.
Yes, Horde of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat, of course, which I should know off the top of my head. So Tyranny of Dragons is going to be bringing these together. There's a great new cover from Hydro 74. The opening chapter has been reworked, and it includes all of the errata as well.
Yeah, and fewer TPKs. Those of you not familiar with Horde of the Dragon Queen, because it was the first major adventure written for the edition, there were sort of, we're still working out some of the kinks, and there were a few of those early encounters where it was really easy to die.
Yes. Yeah, I'd say so. Which, not always a bad thing, but yeah, you don't want it to be too frequent of a thing.
I mean, the merit that it had is that was very old school, because that is very first edition of basically, welcome to this adventure, and now you all die.
I want to say there is one of the earliest 3rd edition adventures as well, and the name slips my mind, but it was the one by Richard Baker. And
the Forge of Fury.
Forge of Fury. And there were similar encounters. If you weren't prepared for the Black Dragon at the end, that could be a very tough encounter. But
that's a spoiler, Bart.
Yeah, I know.
I'm kidding. The Black Dragon's on the cover.
Kind of like, I wonder if they thought about that at the time. Like, well, we know dragons are going to sell this thing, but
right.
But there's also the Roper encounter in Forge of Fury as well. And if you're not prepared for the level of party going against that could wipe you out pretty quick.
Yeah. As a DM, if I create an encounter like that, one of the techniques I will often use, if I want people to really get to have an informed choice on going into such an encounter, I will often have some warning, like you hear a ton of creatures in there, or that dragon looks really powerful. Or I have even gone as far as, having some NPC ride by on a horse who basically yells the equivalent of "Run for your lives!"
Have your players learned to pay attention to your signposts that say danger?
Almost never.
I was going to.
They still do it. Even afterward, especially the few times, it's been a while, but the few times where there are character deaths, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, we had no idea it was going to be so bad." And I usually don't say anything, but what I'm thinking is, well, there were only 5 NPCs who told you you're going to die.
What do they call it? The apisematic colors of nature. Like, look, the snake was clearly orange and red all the way along its length. Why did you try and pick it up? Because I just wanted to. I'm the same way. It can be a challenge to introduce a higher level villain in advance, just to kind of, from a storytelling perspective, introduce them early on, make them the big threat that they can reach later without the players wanting to take him on immediately. Kudos to the bravery, but it can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
And you don't want the villain just kind of running off scared either, because that defeats the entire purpose of that. But in any case, there we go. So we've got a few questions from Twitter. We have some questions that we collect as always. Thank you to our moderators. TK has joined the fray and has been sending questions over the wall as well. So thank you, TK, very kindly. So if we don't get to your questions today, we do archive them. We do look to go through them in future episodes. We had a couple of questions coming in regarding the D&D Essentials kit. And we had a couple of questions on sidekicks. So before we get to the sidekicks question, I will ask you, who or what is the greatest sidekick in media?
There's so many great sidekicks. So as a kid, one of my favorites, because he was close to my age, was Short Round in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to watch him now, but
yeah, I don't think it ages well.
No.
Yeah, but it helps if you're close to his age.
Yes.
Then it's cool to see this kid, standing side by side with Indiana Jones.
No, I agree. I was a similar age, and it's a wish fulfillment. Like,
right.
I'm not a adventuring superhero type guy, but I know one who is, and I can tag along with him. So,
yeah. Who would your pick be?
I'm trying not to go towards the obvious choices, but I am anyways. I never was a big fan of Robin, but who kind of fulfilled the same role. Like, you're not a big, strong guy like Batman, but maybe you can kind of clean up, the villains that he doesn't take on. And then, he's a gymnastics guy, so the playground, all the activity on the playground is actually training to be Robin.
See, I always liked Robin, partly because my introduction to Batman was the old Batman TV show. And in that show, Batman is so campy. I mean, Robin is also campy because he has all of his funny sayings.
Yes.
But Robin actually often comes across as a little more like together.
Yeah.
Like Batman really feels like a cartoon character in that live action show.
Yes.
And it's like Robin has his feet planted a little more firmly on the ground. And the character has, I think, he's been written many different ways over the years, but also an interesting arc than how he comes into his own as Nightwing. So I like some versions of Robin.
I will say now we are watching a hell of a lot of Teen Titans Go in our household, where he's moved from the sidekick role to the leader role. So yeah, he's a bit of a different character.
He's very serious in Teen Titans.
Yes, he has to live up to that leader role. And for some reason, I don't necessarily enjoy his character, but I appreciate his character more because it is a little bit more distinct than just the sidekick now.
Now, a sidekick I actually like truly more than either of the ones we've talked about thus far is Chewbacca. But it always pains me to refer to him as a sidekick, because part of it is I've always thought it's so funny that this Wookiee we discover is possibly centuries old, is playing second fiddle to this rake. I mean, granted, a lovable rake. And I always view the medal ceremony at the end of Star Wars: A New Hope, where it ends with Chewie roaring. Yeah. I always interpret that as him saying, "Where's my medal?" I was also flying the ship that blew that knocked Darth Vader out of the sky.
I never, the centuries old. I'm like, I always kind of liked the original sort of take of the wish fulfillment. He's the dog driving next to George Lucas, and he's like, wow, what if my dog was sentient and could take the wheel when I needed it to. And kind of I don't know if this was a novel choice. It felt somewhat novel to have a character in a movie who the audience could not understand what they were saying. It had to be entirely interpreted by the character who could speak to them.
And it's amazing how much we connect with the character, even though we have never been able to understand what he's saying.
Right. Well, but again, that's how we kind of treat our animals now. Like, we know that they need something.
Plus, how do we know Han is ever correctly interpreting what he said? Because Han might actually be an unreliable translator.
That's true. It's funny, because I just picked up, because everyone knows The Wizard of Oz, but there's great material from the following books. They don't always age well either, but they do have some great fantasy elements. And in the next book, there is a scene where the Jack Pumpkinhead meets the Scarecrow, and they don't know that they speak the same language, although obviously they do. They think, well, I'm from a different country in Oz. You can't understand me, I can't understand you, we need a translator. The translator knows you guys are being fools, but I'm going to mistranslate things anyways. And you can hear me mistranslating it because everyone is speaking the same language, but it's an odd scene. But, let's get to the questions. Sorry, I've been stalling too long here. DMB asks, is the sidekick intended to only be used in the D&D Essentials kit? Would it be practical to use it for family game night to take my son and wife through Tyranny of Dragons, appropriately enough?
Use it. The sidekick rules in the Essentials kit are usable with any of our other adventures. However, there is a catch. Those other adventures have not been optimized for having a smaller than normal party, whereas that was something that Chris Perkins and I had in mind when working on the Essentials kit. So you might need to, if you have one player and a sidekick, or you have two players and one of whom is playing a sidekick, you're probably going to have to tone down some of the combat encounters if you don't want them to be overly dangerous.
Okay.
My recommendation is to actually not worry about it too much. I've talked before about one of my favorite techniques as a DM is if something ends up being more difficult than I desire for the particular play experience in the session of a campaign, I will adjust difficulty on the fly. You can reduce the number of hit points a creature has. You can make it deal less damage than it would normally deal. Remember that the hit points in a monster stat block, as well as the damage in a monster stat block, represents an average. And so a monster has a range of potential hit points and a range of potential damage. And so you can actually make these adjustments within the design of the monster without, basically what I'm saying is you don't have to feel like you're cheating, even though a DM can honestly do whatever they want behind the DM screen, always with the aim of building the most fun possible for their players. So again, I wouldn't spend a whole ton of time unless you enjoy retuning encounters. For a smaller group, I'd say just run it, and adjust things on the fly.
So yes, enough jibber jabber, Eric Green says, before this question. So we'll continue the questions. On that note, Zool, will the rules for followers be included in additional products, or is this the only way to obtain them?
We are looking at a possible home for the more complete follower rules, so stay tuned. We don't have anything to announce at this time, but anyone who saw the Sidekick Unearthed Arcana knows there was more there, and that material really is behind what you see in the Essentials kit, and we would love to do more with the Sidekick material because it was received so well, and it proved to be a really fun tool for us to use in the Essentials kit.
Alrighty, yes, we are looking at, for D&D Extra Life, we're working on a couple of adventure materials as well, and there's been a call to include a sidekick or two option in there, so that might be another avenue to include those rules.
I encourage people that if you are interested in trying out a character who is simpler than the character classes in the Player's Handbook, the sidekicks are playable as player characters.
It's a good way if you have somebody who might be available for a drop-in session.
Yes.
Hey, I'd love to play D&D. I don't have a character, or I can only play tonight as part of your ongoing campaign, but I'd love to participate. There was an earlier question. Do you have a favorite beverage when you are playing Dungeons & Dragons?
Yes, an old-fashioned. That is my drink of choice. Yeah. I rarely start a session, especially in my home game, drinking an old-fashioned. Our tradition is midway through the session. Our home sessions are usually 4 hours long. Midway through, we'll have a break for snacks and whatnot. And one of my players, my dear friend Jimmy, our tradition is he always makes me an old-fashioned.
And what is an old-fashioned?
The old-fashioned, true to its name, is one of the first cocktails, and it is a mix of some sugar or simple syrup, bitters, and rye or bourbon. And then sometimes people will put in cherries or an orange peel. There are a variety of ways you can prepare it, but it is a very simple cocktail.
See, that's interesting. It can't have originally then been called an old-fashioned, right? Like, if that were one of the earliest cocktails, it must have had a name.
The new-fashioned?
Right, people went back to it.
It is sort of a sibling to a Manhattan.
Okay.
I also like Manhattan, but for me, the old-fashioned is where it's at.
This backdoor shady dealer had asked, how is your home game going, by the way, by the by?
So being sick this past week with the bad sinus infection that I had meant I had to cancel my Saturday session, which was a major bummer because my home campaign is nearing its end. The group has snuck into Castle Ravenloft. Remember, this campaign is taking place 200 years after the events of the Curse of Strahd, where they discovered that in the intervening 2 years, someone has been putting the levitation crystals at the base of Castle Ravenloft to make it possible for it to maybe lift off. So it's going to be an exciting final session or two as the group attempts to actually bring Strahd back to life, because they have learned that if they bring him back to life, Barovia and the Vampire Lord and his minions will get shunted back into the domain of dread, because right now Barovia is back in its home world, and they want Strahd and his minions to basically get out and go back to the mists. And they at first thought, well, maybe we can just prevent him from coming back and that will solve our problems. But so many different villain groups are trying to bring Strahd back, they thought our only way to solve this is send him back to the demi-plane of dread. And they discovered that the dark powers that created Ravenloft originally, it was created around Strahd himself. So basically he is the necessary ingredient for him and his crew to get sent back. There's more to the story, but I don't want to give too much away.
I wanted to grab a question live from chat, and I love this one so much. Real Pick Brian asks, do people in the Dungeons & Dragons world play Dungeons & Dragons?
I love this question. This was also on Twitter.
And what differences would there be?
So the reason why I love this question is back in the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, which had a number of cartoons in it,
yes,
including the one I often refer to that shows the characters looking at this magic item they think might be a +2 back scratcher.
Yeah, yep.
There was another cartoon that shows several D&D characters playing a role-playing game, and it's called Papers and Paychecks. And they are role-playing students and workers in a technological society. So essentially, they are role-playing being in our world while we role play being in theirs. And so all the way back in first edition, there is evidence of D&D characters playing a D&D-like game. Granted, it wasn't a cartoon, but there is precedence, and I love the idea of these people in different worlds having their preferred role-playing games. And you can imagine that RPGs would develop differently, and Kryn versus Eberron versus Toril versus Orth. In Sigil, there's probably some GURPS-like system they play, and people come from the prime material plane and like, what the heck is this game?
Well, I have to imagine in medieval history there were certainly storytelling games of some kind. We just might not have records of, or maybe we do, I just don't know them. But in a D&D world where there are enough functional manufacturing technologies to be able to make dice on a regular basis, to be able to make Dungeon Master screens, printed books on a bit more regular basis than real-world medieval. Sure, why not? They must have played some sort of role-playing game.
Of our settings, one of the ones where it would be most likely they would have RPGs similar to ours would be Eberron, because Eberron has widespread printing, has rapid transit, has basically the means of production.
I was going to guess there'd be a hell of a good ongoing campaign in Candlekeep.
Yeah.
They probably play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons there.
Yeah. Or again, they might call it Papers and Paychecks.
Yes, they play a lot of Papers and Paychecks. A couple more questions before we move. There was some that Jeremy had grabbed from Twitter. Oh my God, we're already at the back half of the hour. So
Hit me with those questions.
Yes, so we'll move through a little bit more quickly here. Mazur Meezer asks, this is from Ghosts of Saltmarsh. We had, I believe, an errata, potentially errata question. The pressure capsule. It's a common and consumable magic item in the Ghosts of Saltmarsh. Is this meant to have no duration and permanently protect characters from the environmental dangers of deep water?
So yeah, this was a goof. That common magic item is not meant to give you a permanent benefit. It is missing its duration. It is likely in a future printing and in an accompanying errata document to have a duration around 8 hours.
We'll have a future discussion maybe about the errata process. I think
Unless you want to ask me about it now, I think one of our questions actually was about it.
that was just me. That was me asking how the errata process works in general. To use this as a launching point.
Yeah, no, I can give you a sort of a high-level summary of how it works.
Sure.
So what we do with all of our books is after they're released, we keep an eye on Reddit, on Twitter, on other websites, on our Facebook groups, in emails we receive, and in our own play, since we play our products. We just keep our eyes out for things that we might have missed. Despite the fact that each of our books is usually reviewed by several hundred play testers, many different staff people with different areas of expertise. In a 256-page book, sometimes something slips by. It's always, I've said before, it's always a dagger in my side when I see it, because I hate for there to be squeaky wheels. But when that does happen and we discover it, then what we look at is what is the, how can we fix it in the least disruptive way possible? Because what we don't want to do is provide a fix later on that is itself disruptive. Like the fix needs to feel natural. It needs to really address what the missing information is, or sometimes it's the wrong information. And we want to make it so that when we do release that fix, it's seamless to integrate that into your play. Then when it comes to timing, the lights just went off. When it comes to the timing of the release of those fixes, we like to time the release of our errata with a reprinting of the book that includes the errata in it. That really arises from a motivation on our part for there to never be what I refer to as a phantom version of the game. I don't want there to be a situation where the only place that you can get the official version of Dungeons and Dragons is by having your player's handbook and a PDF, or looking on D&D Beyond to find the real rules. I always want to make sure that for people who like to have physical books out there somewhere, whether it's Amazon or your local game store or bookstore, you can get a copy of the book that has the official version in it.
So no one's showing up to the game with counterfeit errata documents.
And
it says right here.
Yeah. I mean, when we know that we've caught something, we're transparent about it. I mean, that's why I just so quickly said, oh yeah, that capsule is not correct, and this is what we're planning on doing to fix it. One of the reasons too why we don't rush those fixes out the door is we like to wait to see is there anything else, so that when we release fixes, we're fixing as many issues as possible and hopefully are then done. Also, it doesn't hurt to allow some time to pass to make sure, again, we're making the right fix, to make sure that it's going to be big, it's really going to be the medicine that piece of the book needs.
And so for something like the pressure capsule, let's say, okay, we've identified there's a miss, there's a duration that needs to be added. So what would be the next step or timeline for that?
So whenever we next do a reprint of Ghost of Saltmarsh, where we have an opportunity to make changes, we would make the changes, the new text would appear in those new versions of the book, and then around when that book hits shelves, we would release on our website a free errata PDF that tells you here's what changed in the latest printing. Here are the fixes. So you don't have to buy a new version of the book. We will always give you the fixes for free. But again, I just like there to be the option for the person who does want the book with all of the official stuff in it.
Yes.
It's out there.
I'm giggling because I always think we should call those errata documents the erratica.
No. But that is something someone could explore on the DM's Guild.
The keyword searching and our Google indexing would go up quite a bit.
Now, there have been a few times in the last 5 years where before sending out official errata for a book, we have told people, here is a thing that needs to be fixed, and we've already fixed it in D&D Beyond. That's happened only a few times, and it's been cases where if we allowed the error to persist, it could very seriously undermine the operation of a core piece of a character. An example of this is there was a mistake that slipped into the first printing of Xanathar's Guide in the Arcane Archer that, if it were not immediately corrected, could really inhibit how the Arcane Archer worked. So we fixed it immediately in D&D Beyond because it was an error that occurred very late in the process, and we're like, oh God, like we knew what it was supposed to be, and it was a case of just when everything was getting typeset, it's a lot of words being moved around and just. I think it was like one word that should have been deleted that didn't get deleted. And so that there are rare cases where we will say, okay, this is serious enough, we need to make an announcement right away. But most of the time, the things are like this capsule in Ghosts of Saltmarsh. It's not going to burn anyone's game to the ground if the DM decides to run that literally and the person is forever after safe from the detrimental effects of high pressure underwater. That is not going to ruin anyone's campaign unless someone is running a campaign where the dangers of pressure are a major portion of the plot. And in that case, I trust the DM to adjust things accordingly.
Yes, that's a bit of a corner case. I agree.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
One never knows.
And that factors into our decision making. Like, how corner case is it?
Right.
This is in contrast to the Arcane Archer, where if the error persisted, it would affect every single person playing that subclass, and that was not an option for us.
What were those old first edition subterranean, or the Murkoth? Were those the underwater creatures?
Oh, one of many.
There was one of those. Yeah, they were deep water creatures.
Yeah.
I think, yes, a case like this is a good opportunity to talk about how does errata work, and then where do we see it appearing from time to time.
And one thing I will say too is there is sometimes confusion about which of the things we say about our books is actually errata. Like, for instance, I occasionally will see people refer to my tweets or the Sage Advice Compendium as errata. So to be totally clear, neither of those things are errata because neither of them are changing the text of your books. Errata is what distinguishes errata from our other sort of official notices about things in the books is errata actually changes the text. The Sage Advice Compendium, we give our thoughts about different rules questions, we clarify things, but none of those clarifications, none of those thoughts change what's on the page of your rule books. And so really, those are just tools for you to help you interpret what's in the book, but it's not the same as what's actually in the book.
Okay.
Errata changes what's actually in the book. So there have been a few times where, again, people have said, well, Jeremy said, errata a book on Twitter. Like, none of our books have ever been errata on Twitter. They are only ever receiving errata through the official errata process, which is, again, the text of the book actually changing and there being a PDF available for free that summarizes the changes in the book.
So the books would be the legislative branch. Sage Advice would be the judicial branch. And then the Dungeon Master would be the executive branch.
Oh,
Does that model hold true? I'm
pretty
inordinately
well.
fond of this model.
It works pretty well.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, because the DM is the executive in the sense that the DM is the one who's actually running the system.
Right.
Because the system can't run itself.
The legislative branch writes the rules, and the judicial branch interprets the adjudication.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Well done.
I'm done for the day. Armando Doval, who you had mentioned, does some fine answering rules queries on Twitter as well.
Yes.
So we wanted to call out one of his questions. The rules for creature size, space, and reach seem to be designed specifically for 2D situations. As a Dungeon Master, do you take creature height into account when handling 3D combat with flying creatures?
So my baseline is I always treat size as three-dimensional. So every creature is, when it comes to their size, if you're playing on a grid, every creature is essentially a cube. Now, of course, they're not actually a cube. Space really represents the operational space of a creature in combat, the amount of space they need to operate and that they sort of take up, not that they fill. Really, it's only creatures like the gelatinous cube that fills its space.
You're right, an actual cube.
But again, that effective space is when you are dealing with a 3D situation, think of it as a cube. But again, really to dig deeper with this question, what Armando is getting at is there are creatures that, like if they lift up their arms, would actually bust out of their own cube.
Right.
Like giants are like this. Even actually many humanoids. Like I am 6'3", so if, as a D&D human, basically my head would be sticking out of a box, because my space would be a 5-foot cube, but a good part of my head would be peeking out and outside of it.
You're the exact same height as David Harbaugh from Stranger Things.
Oh, well, there you go. I always start again with the space, turned into 3D, and then I improvise thinking, well, if I actually know a height for the creature, how tall are they? We do give some rough guidelines in the rules on jumping for actually sort of figuring out on the fly how far somebody can reach up. And so I use all of that as I improvise things like reach. But you can't go wrong by just using the regular rules for reach and treating everybody as a cube walking around. And it's funny because then if everyone was actually a cube, you have a game of where basically everyone is a Modron, walking around looking like a D6.
It's our game of Flatlander.
Yes.
And then, oh no, the cubes have arrived.
Yeah.
All right. right, we've got about 10 minutes here, so I know you've got some questions to pull from Twitter.
Well,
grabbing some of those.
You got the one I wanted to answer about papers and paychecks.
Yes, and we do have a request to put that into the next lore you should know as well.
Oh, there is one question on Twitter that it is one of the most asked questions over the past few years. When will the next Unearthed Arcana drop?
I have the same question.
Yeah. So, as I think many of you probably know, UA, its schedule is it comes out when it's ready to come out. But I can tell you, the next time it comes out is actually pretty soon.
Okay.
So we have some stuff cooking in the kitchen that will come out for you to review. I know many of you are still enjoying the Artificer and putting it through its paces. We're also in the process of doing a number of revisions for the Artificer. The next time you're likely to see the Artificer is in a book at some point. So we have some non-Artificer stuff coming up for you in the near future.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Oh Snap Dad asks, could the pressure capsule work in space? I just like that question.
Hey, if you're doing Spelljammer, please make it work in space. Do anything to make your Spelljammer dreams come true. Because I'm saying that actually non-sarcastically, because when I was a kid and Spelljammer came out, the spaceships like the Mind Flayer Nautiloid and all that stuff. Oh, I was just enchanted by it.
I never was a Spelljammer. That was not my jam. I was always Greyhawk at Forgotten Realms, but even kind of like anti sci-fi, which is weird because I like mashups. I like Star Wars almost because it's a sci-fi fantasy mashup.
Right.
But Spelljammer didn't do it for me as much as like the darker fantasy of like Greyhawk and Dark Sun and things like that.
See, I was a D&D omnivore and still am, where I like all of it, because part of why I love D&D is that it is able to express such a huge array of different fantasy subgenres. So it can do, gritty sword and sorcery. It can do campy space fantasy. It can do, everything and the kitchen sink high fantasy like the Forgotten Realms.
Right.
It can do, romantic high fantasy like Dragonlance. It can do gothic horror like Ravenloft. I mean, it's fabulous.
I should say Spelljammer, it does seem like a great vehicle to go from literally world to world.
Which was its goal.
And change up like, oh, we've done high fantasy on this world. We're going to go someplace else now. See what that world's.
Yeah, I mean, because Spelljammer is a really great companion to Planescape, where Planescape is all about going from the different planes of existence, one from another. Whereas Spelljammer is all about traveling within the material plane from one world to another. So you bring the two together and you've got a comprehensive view of multiversal transit in Dungeons & Dragons.
So we've got a few minutes left if there's any more questions on Twitter, but while you are searching for those, I will mention that this weekend we do have Founders and Legends Day. Luke Gygax will be running the second Founders and Legends Day in Los Angeles, Saturday, July 27th. We'll be streaming starting at noon Pacific time. It'll be on the Gary Con channel. We'll host it on the D&D channel. We're going to be streaming 3 games all day till 10 p.m. Chris Lindsay will be dungeon mastering the first game. Kate Welch will be a player in the second game, I believe, as the current schedule says. And I did also want to mention Founders and Legends is also in support of Extra Life. Our charity endeavor for Children's Miracle Network Hospitals has kicked off. So feel free to donate to the Founders and Legends. Has a group, the D&D team, of course, has a group as well. And as part of that, Emmy Tanji, our own Emmy Tanji, has designed the first of our Extra Life t-shirts on custom ink. I'll put those links in chat as well. This year we're going to be doing a couple of design iterations for Extra Life. So we've started, this first one is Lulu the Hollyphant and Jezebel the Quasit from Descent into Avernus. the next design is a different character from Descent into Avernus. So a very T-shirt memed type of creature. So
Wow, and I love Lulu the Oliphant.
yes, I think I've come around when I did not always appreciate the goofballery of some of the creatures. Kind of going to your point, D&D is able to encapsulate a lot of different styles, and it doesn't always have to be the dark, terrifying monsters. There's room for the goofy ones as well.
Definitely.
And the Hollyphant certainly in the latter category. Do you have a question from Twitter?
Let's see. Now, one of them was, there was a lot of chatter about spells per round or bonus action spells the past week. Can you recap and go into details? Oh boy, I'm not sure 5 minutes is enough time for me to go into this. But I do think it is a worthy topic for me and Greg Tito to dig into in our next Sage Advice podcast. If any of you have never seen that before, Greg Tito and I will usually take a single rules topic and talk about it in depth, sometimes for 30 or 40 minutes, just that one topic. He and I have talked about bonus actions before, but the question of how many spells can you actually cast on a turn or a round, because new people are coming to the game all the time, I think it's worth us revisiting. There were great questions about it online this past week. And so, yeah, I'll talk to Greg about us digging into that next time. And the short form I can give you right now, because
The short round?
The short round, yes, to bring it back to sidekicks. The short form is often you'll be at D&D tables where people will say you can't ever cast more than one spell on your turn. And what I often like to remind people is there is no rule in the game that governs the whole game that says that. That is basically a D&D urban legend. That there is a rule that tells you can only ever cast one spell on your turn.
Yeah.
Now, you are often functionally limited to one spell on your turn because of the number of actions you have, namely one, unless you're using something like Action Surge. But then again, because there is something like Action Surge, there are ways to suddenly have more actions, and then the bonus action makes things a little more tasty, a little more complex. So all of that, Greg and I will dive into.
All right. I'm about to pop a few links into to chat.
Oh my God, I just saw Lulu the Hollyphant.
Yes.
So cute. If Pelham were here, he would zoom in on that and show it to you all. But you can just imagine, adorable elephant with wings.
And it shoots, basically good positive energy out of its trunk.
That's right.
So
That's right.
We are, that's another, it's going to be part of the Extra Life apparel, and then we're working on other Extra Life inclusions for Hollyphants as well.
And for any of you who might be hesitant about the inclusion of cute or whimsical things in your games, keep in mind that even if you're running a very serious game, as I currently have been actually at home, my current Gothic horror game, remember that one of the most powerful ways to set people up for something truly scary is by misdirecting them with something funny or cute. That tonal shifts in a story are often how you can heighten drama. And so actually having some things that are not, grimdark or super epic can actually help make the grim or epic thing feel more grim or epic because it actually has something that it's in contrast with.
Yes.
Similarly, villainy in a D&D game seems far more villainous if you actually have something virtuous and beautiful to contrast it with. And so that's one thing, especially in my home game, I often love to remind my players through the NPCs they meet and the gorgeous places they visit. There are beautiful places and kind people worth saving, worth protecting. Because the issue is if you have a story, especially a fantasy story, where everything is essentially a pile of garbage or evil, it's like, what exactly are we protecting? What are we fighting for?
It's a cheap kind of emotional ploy, but it works. I mean, John Woo, why does his villain stand out? Because he messed with his puppy.
Yeah.
In the game, if the villain messes with the characters directly, like, well, okay, there's maybe a mechanical response. But if they mess with something else that's cute and defenseless, they are often, I've found oftentimes more likely to have an emotional reaction to that villain.
Right.
Or
you know, it doesn't always have to be something cute. It can also be something of, you know, grand splendor. You know, there might be, like in my home game, there is a library that it is built around an academy of wizardry that houses this staff that is made out of wood that comes from heaven itself. And when you are near that staff, you are just filled with divine bliss. And so any time I want to make people feel like, oh no, something good in the world is threatened, is if something were to happen to that staff, because it represents that there are wondrous things in the world worth protecting, people worth saving, goodness that you want to help flourish.
It's a good lesson in the real world as well, I would say.
Yeah.
So we are just after 2 o'clock, so we're going to kick it over to Heroes of the Veil as well. But I did want to, of course, thank Mr. Crawford for taking an hour out of his day to join us. I saw the email last week that was saying, leave you alone. You're busy.
It is true.
Which I ignored.
One of our producers did send out an email to the entire D&D department saying, Jeremy is finishing a book right now. Please don't bug him.
Thank you as well for spending an hour out of your day. Congratulations to our sweepstakes winners. We'll get these out to you as well. Our prizes, thanks as always to our followers, our subscribers, of course, to our moderators for helping take part of the D&D team as well. So we'll switch over here to Heroes of the Veil. We'll come back again, answer a few more of your questions. I know you got a lot in, so we'll capture them all and look to go through more of those next time. And on behalf of, I'm waiting for Pelham to turn it off here, but I've got end screen to see if this doesn't.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. And
I think we're off.